Okay. Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone. Does everyone have source sheets, the packets of sources? Yes? Great, okay, wonderful. Great to see you. Thank you for coming. This apparently is the most controversial and exciting thing I've ever taught about. Who knew? It's all about cheese. I understand, I guess. Yeah. What? I thought it was cheese tasting. That's sorry. Shush. That'd be good. Okay. So let's get started. This is. I apologize. There's a mysterious line across all of the photocopies. I think it means we need to clean the copy or something, but it is what it is. First source in the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussing various things pertaining to Gentiles that we don't eat, that we even have a benefit prohibition. Rabbi Yehuda Sha'al Rabbi Yishmael et Rabbi Yehoshua Keshayum Halchin B'derech. So Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yehoshua, they were taking a walk, and he asked him, Mipnei ma'asru gvinot shel goyim. Why is it that Gentile cheese is forbidden? Amar lo mipnei shema midinotad bekeva shel nevela, because they make it, they harden it, they curdle it inside the stomach of carrion, nevela. Nevela is an animal that is dead and it wasn't shechted. Okay, that's the definition of nevela. It doesn't matter what the species is. It didn't have proper shechita. That's called nevela. Amar lo v'halo kevat ola chamura mikevat nevela v'amru kohen shedato yafesh shrafa chaya v'lo hodu lo aval amru lo ein hanin v'lo mo'ilin. Okay, this is a analogy that's offered to the stomach of an ola, a cow that is offered as a burnt offering. And which is a much stricter status than this stomach of a cow that is nevela, and yet there are uses of this stomach which are permissible. In other words, we don't seem to find that stomachs of animal stomachs have this status that would render it problematic. Okay, that's the it's not a perfect analogy, but that's the analogy. Chazar marlo mipnei shema midinota bekevat egle avodah zara. New answer. The reason why is that they use idolatrous cows that were offered up as sacrifices in an idolatrous pagan ceremony. They use those cow stomachs to curdle the cheese. Right? That's this is how cheese. It's a reaction. Right? You know what cheese is? How it's made? It's a chemical reaction enzyme in the cow stomach. Makes the cheese process, the hardening, whatever could happen. Okay, so they would, I guess it was discovered. I think cheese was probably discovered when they would, take a, if you slaughter a calf that's still nursing, it has milk in its stomach that it drank when it was alive, and that milk, is part as it digests in the stomach. The enzymes in the stomach can make it turn into cheese. This is actually discussed in the Talmud. That, or they just sacks were made. They used stomachs to for storage, and they discovered, we poured in milk, and now I have cheese. Maybe it was an accident or something. In any event. So the second answer that Rabbi Yeshua offers to Rabbi Yishmael, the reason why there's a decree against Gentile cheese is because they use idolatrous cows, or cows that were offered sacrifice in pagan temples. They then take the stomachs and they use it for making cheese. Therefore, the cheese is the status of idolatry. Are all the source sheets done? There should be more on the middle of the table? There are no more? Oh wow, I'm so sorry. Can you share again? We have offers of sharing. Wonderful. Okay. We're in the middle of towards the end of source 1. So he says, Rabbi Yishmael answers, Amar lo im ken lama lo asra b'hana'ah. If that's true, if that's the reason, if we're concerned about idolatry, about paganism in our cheese, then really it should be a more strict prohibition. It shouldn't just be an eating prohibition, it should be a benefit prohibition. Nisur hana'ah, a benefit prohibition, for example, chametz on Pesach is a benefit prohibition. Not only can you not eat it, you can't sell it. You can't feed it to your animals. You can't get benefit from it in any way. And if that's the reason why there's a decree against Gentile cheese, if it's connected to idolatry, it really should be a much stricter rule than a mere prohibition against eating. Hisiu l'davar acher. So Rabbi Yeshua tried to change the subject. Okay? He offers 2 answers. Rabbi Yishmael has a response to each answer. He doesn't accept them. So Rabbi Yeshua changes the subject. Okay? He tries to divert him. And he says, Amar lo, Yishmael achi, Yishmael, my brother, tell me, Hechatak Korah, how do you read this verse in Shir HaShirim? Is it ki tovim do daech miyayin, or ki tovim do decha miyayin, or ki tovim do daech? Is your love is better than wine, or your love is better than wine? Is your love in the feminine, or is it in the masculine? Do decha or do daech? How do you read that verse? If you understand the rabbinic understanding of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs is a dialogue between the Jewish people and God. So where the Jewish God has the masculine voice, and the Jewish people has the feminine voice, and this is this romance, and that's the story of Shir HaShirim. So you have a verse that can be read ambiguously. He's asking, whose line is this? Is this God's line, or is this the Jewish people's line? Or even maybe more basic, could just be like, how do you read this verse? What does it mean? Is it a masculine word or a feminine word? Amar lo, tovim do daich miyayin. Amar lo, ein davar ken, sherecha v'ro melamed olav, l'rech shmanecha tovim. Okay, no, because the next verse is in the masculine, and so this verse also should be in the masculine. That's our Mishnah. That's our earliest source. So what's clear from this Mishnah is that there is a prohibition against Gentile cheese. That's a predicate, right? The whole conversation between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yeshua, everyone acknowledges that we don't eat cheese from Gentiles. And Rabbi Shmuel tries to find, well, what's the reason for this? And for some reason, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't want to tell him. So the questions we have are, so why is there a decree against Gentile cheese? Why does Rabbi Yeshua not want to tell Rabbi Shmuel the reason for this decree? Okay, those are other questions about this Mishnah? Yes, Jeff.
Is it clear that he doesn't want to tell, or maybe he just doesn't know a good reason for it?
He doesn't know a good reason. That would be a reason why he doesn't want to tell him the answer. I mean, he offers two reasons. He has two answers.
Right.
And he pushes off both answers. And so it could be right. So he may not know another answer, and he's the only ones he's heard. That's why he stops, or some other reason. The other question would be, why is this verse in Shir HaShirim? Why is this how we change? Why does he use this verse to change the subject? That's another question. Okay. So the Gemara discusses this Mishnah, source 2. Hesilu devar acher v'chulei mai ki tovim dodecha miyayin ki atar Rav Dimi amra Knesset Yisrael lefnei Kadosh Baruch Hu Ribono shel Olam harivim alai divrei dodecha yoter miyena shel Torah. Okay, so he says, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he came and he said that this is how we read this verse. It's Knesset Yisrael. It's the Jewish people speaking to God and saying, your divrei dodecha, the words of those who love you. That's how they read it. That's the drasha. That's the interpretation. The words of those who love you is more precious than the wine of your Torah. In other words, he's saying rabbinic decrees, the statements of the rabbis are more beloved, are more valuable to us than the pure, straight words of the Torah alone. So it's maybe a reference to the importance of these rabbinic decrees, such as the prohibition of eating Gentile cheese. That's maybe why he's alluding to a verse which is basically a praise. It's the Jewish people telling God, we embrace the teachings of the rabbis, dodecha, those who love you, more than the wine that is like the pure Torah itself. Maishna Haikra L'Shaile. So why did he why is this verse to ask him? Why did he choose this verse to ask him? Yeshua ben Pazi, Yeshua bar Ami, Mireshe Dekra, from the beginning of that verse, the same verse that says, Yeshkenim Nishikot Pihu. What's the beginning of the verse? The beginning of the verse is, kiss me with the kisses of your mouth. Amar le Yishmael achai, chashok siftotecha zo bezo, v'al tivehel lahashiv. Okay? So he's saying, how do you read this verse? But of course, Rabbi Shmuel knows all of Tanakh by heart, and so when he is quoted the second half of that verse, Rabbi Shmuel is immediately thinking of the first half of that same verse. The beginning of that same verse is Yishikeim Yishikot Pihu, like kiss me with the kisses of your mouth, which is basically saying, pucker your lips. Okay? Meaning shut your trap, stop asking so many questions. That's what's going on here. And so that's the verse is really, he's diverting him from asking these questions by quoting a verse that alludes to like puckering your lips, meaning close your mouth, stop asking questions, okay? He's basically shut up and kiss me, like in the movies. Okay, that's what he's saying to Rabbi Shmuel. So why? Well, why not? So my time. Okay, what's so bad about asking questions? We are a tradition that embraces asking questions. Why does Rabbi Shua not want more questions? Amar Ula v'itema Rav Shmuel bar Abba gezer chadasha hi v'ein mefakbekin ba. Okay, it was a new gezerah. It was a new decree. They had just decided that there was going to be a prohibition against eating Gentile cheese, and therefore we don't ask too many questions about it because it's new. And if we ask questions about it, presumably it would undermine. This is a little curious. You might think, if it's new, we should ask a lot of questions about it. But this position is we don't want to ask too many questions about this new verse. We'll see some interpretations on that as well. But then the Gemara can ask, but what's the real reason? Okay, my gezerah. So what exactly is this gezerah, this decree about? Why is there this rabbining prohibition against Gentile cheese? Amar Shimon bar Pazi, Amar Rishon ben Levi. So new answer. We haven't seen this before. Mishum nikor. Okay, because of nikor. Nikor is a concern that was very common, sort of prevalent in the Talmud, a concern that a snake may have sort of come in, drunk from your cup, or tried to eat some of the cheese and has infected the cheese with its venom. This is a pretty widespread Talmudic concern. The Talmud discusses prohibitions against drinking water or wine that was left uncovered because there are snakes that would come in and contaminate the food, and that is a concern. Gentiles don't know how to keep their cheese, locked up, and the snakes are going to infect it with venom. This is the reason.
Is this a health concern or a spiritual concern?
No, it's out, meaning you'll die from venom, the poisonous snakes. Yeah. Your question, though, I just want to say, your question, it reflects a certain, I would say, I call it a Protestant worldview where religion is a particular confined sphere of human activity which is distinct from politics and culture and language and health, right, etc., cosmology, right? So religion. So okay, so why, if the reason is we're worried about snakes, why couldn't they just have said it's about snakes? Because of Ula's position, Amar Ula ki gazri gezirta b'ma'arava lo megalu taima ad tresar yarche shata. Okay, when they would make a gezerah in the west, where's the west? The west is Israel. Okay, when they made a gezerah in Israel in the west, they would not reveal the rationale for this gezerah, for this decree, for a full year, for 12 months, or a year of 12 months. Why? Dilma iki inish dilos virale, viati lizil zuleba. There might be somebody who doesn't agree with the rationale, and then they'll treat the decree lightly. If you tell people the reason for your rules, they might disagree, and then they might not follow the rules. This is worth unpacking for a minute. You might say, well, if I don't agree with the reason, then I shouldn't follow the rule. If I think the reason is foolish, like I'm not afraid of snakes, or I live in Ireland and St. Patrick already got rid of the snakes, so I don't have to, right? So maybe you don't agree with the reason, so you don't have to follow the rule, or you don't agree with the reason. Why should the rule be binding on you? And here we're saying we don't even tell people the reason because it's so important that they not undermine the rule. So any reactions to this position? Do you want to defend it, or do you want to criticize it? What? It's elitist, right? We, the rabbis who legislate, we're not going to deign to tell you our reasons. It's not for you to ask why, it's just for you to be obedient. It's elitist. Okay. Any other reactions? One time? Ariel?
Well, it seems to imply that there must be another hidden reason.
Oh.
Beyond.
So maybe even this is not the real reason. Maybe the snake venom, there could be some other reason. Or no, after 12 months. Ula's saying after 12 months, they do tell people. It's just the first 12 months they don't tell people. Because after 12 months, everybody already has, kashrut their pots, and they're already, using kosher cheese, so they know where to find it, etc. So that then they can tell people the reason. and no one's going to freak out. So, I guess it means you never really know. Like, what if, you have a reason that's recorded? Is that the real reason? Maybe they never tell the real reason, or maybe there's some other reason. How does that make you feel, though? Is that inspiring, or is that undermine your, like?
It just seems like such a contradiction from what we're used to now in Judaism. And maybe that was like the norm, and fine. But I guess when we think about modern Jews, we think about highly intelligent people. We've all sat at dinner tables with our children and said, please God, just make them stop asking questions so that they will choose some food. But we encourage this so we don't say it out loud.
Right.
And so I think it's just a shock when you hear these like fake reasons. I mean, geez, I can come up with better stories than this. That's why you should be kosher, not.
Yeah. We have this whole like culture of like questioning authority and investing in everything. And here we're told like they make a rule. They don't tell us the real reason for it for at least 12 months, lest somebody argue too much. And like, what's wrong with arguing? We love arguing.
Especially when we have like books of literature.
Yeah,
we do is argue.
I mean, we have the Talmud. Talmud is a record, right? Lots of debate. Good. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 3 and a half.
I don't think I'm formulating this really well, but is it possible that the rabbis at the time were thinking that their authority is so great that they're at the level of like Hulk, where like they can just come up with reasons, not explain anything, and just do these commands?
Yeah, so maybe, look, why should they, right, their authority is so great, they don't need to give reasons because people listen to them anyway. I think there's something to that because, I think there's something to that. We'll come back to it. Or maybe the authority isn't so great, that's why they have, meaning if they're really confident in authority, they can give a reason, someone can say, oh, that's a bad reason, but meaning, Congress passes a law, we think it's rotten, we still have to follow it, meaning, right, so.
But then there's a second part to that, because it's like forming a habit, like first you do, then you understand. Like I think that's somewhere around this rule time where they
Right, very nice, very nice. Nasa v'nishma, very nice. So like, I love this Miller cheese, I'm not going back, it's just so good. Your taste buds get numb. You're right, you forget. Good. Okay. David?
Well, this is not just latest, this is even more latest because this wasn't telling, right, he wasn't withholding the reason from some random Jewish Rav.
Oh, yeah. Right, so Yeshua and Rabbi Yishmael, right, well, that's a good point. Well, maybe he knew that like the Mishnah was walking behind taking notes, so that's why he didn't. But right, it's Rabbi Yishmael himself who didn't get the answer. It's a very good point. It's not like we're not publicizing the reason. Very good. Ariel, do you know there?
Well, just like in response to the fact that it seems like counterintuitive sort of to like the rest of Jewish tradition, I don't think it does necessarily. It's just weird because it sort of groups it more like in the category of like there's two categories in this book, right? And like sort of groups it in this like hope category where like, but usually things that are a hope we understand like to be a hope more from like God.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't really dive with that.
Right, it's one thing if the Torah tells us something we can't understand, but if the rabbis legislate something, we expect to understand why. It's a very fair point. So
people react to the reason. So if you make a rule and you want to see if the rule is going to have its desired effect, you make the rule, you don't tell people the reason, and you see if it has the desired effect. But if people react to the reason, then you don't know if it failed to have the desired effect because they're reacting to the reason.
Right, good. You have to isolate your variables, right? So if you tell people we're no Gentile cheese because it's infested with snakes, and everybody knows that, and so they're hyper vigilant about snakes for a year, so then your snake poisoning goes down, you don't know, is it the cheese or is it the fact that everyone's talking about snakes? So you don't tell them the reason, you just eliminate Gentile cheese, and then you can evaluate a year later, has our snake, fatality rate declined or not? Very good. Very good. Okay, two more and then we'll continue with some other sources, because we're still pretty early in the history of this topic. Yes?
I feel like it reflects a lack of trust of like the regular person to evaluate the situation like properly. That if they really believe that what they're legislating is really important, whether it's for religious or for health reasons, and they don't trust that like Haaretz or whoever will like faithfully follow that like reasoning, then they're not going to tell them.
If you're really confident that your reasoning is good, you should be able to share it with others. And so they don't trust them. What don't they trust? They don't trust them to do it anyway, even if you disagree, or they don't trust them to agree with them. Like they're two different.
I think they don't trust them to. I think they like think they'll not follow it if they know the reason because they think they're better than it, but then like it'll like backfire and they'll still get poisoned. Whatever, I don't know. Like I think they don't trust that people can make their own reasons, just knowing the reasons for and against.
Yeah.
Or they're not educated enough, or you don't want to be educated enough. So it's like if a certain population, let's say, you don't educate, but you just tell them follow all these rules.
Right.
So I think I'll just I'll say something in favor of like authority. I think if you're going to have a legal system, you need to have authority. And if you look at the Torah, it seems that we're all supposed to be doing these mitzvot kind of together. And if some people are eating Gentile cheese and some people aren't, then they're not going to eat in each other's homes. And if some people celebrate Shavuot, start counting, 49 days after, the day after Pesach, and some people start counting 49 days starting at Sunday, which is what, most people think the Torah, like the first glance the Torah seems to suggest, then you'll have people celebrating Shavuot on 2 different days. So somehow, if we're all going to be celebrating Shavuot on the same day, we all have to have some mechanism for determining. No, the Torah says, count your 7 weeks from Macharat HaShabbat, the day after Shabbat. The day after Shabbat does not mean Sunday. The day after Shabbat means the day after Pesach. And even though I don't know if the verses, that doesn't sound like what the verse is saying, but there has to be some, if we're all going to celebrate Shavuot together, there has to be some body vested with the power to make a decision like that on behalf of all of us. And we all have to buy into that. Otherwise, we'll be celebrating Shavuot on different days. And we won't be eating in each other's homes. So I think if we're going to be like in this project of keeping the Torah together, there has to be some system of authority where somebody has the power to say, eat this, don't eat this, and this is when Shavuot is going to be. And so even with the embrace of diversity and argumentation and et cetera, at the end of the day, there has to be, for a community to have any cohesion, we have to have the ability, I think, to come to like some decisions about certain things and then move forward. So I think this Gemara maybe is saying, look, for whatever reason, the religious leadership decided we shouldn't eat Gentile cheese anymore, and Ula felt that in general, when the rabbinic decrees were made, the rationale were not always shared. So the reasons that we find aren't necessarily the reasons they had, or maybe they only told the reasons later, et cetera, because they didn't have like this true security in their authority. They couldn't force people by the way Congress can. They didn't have the artifacts of a state to enforce their authority. So they required people to voluntarily give them authority, and so. This is one tact that they resorted to. The Gemara continues and gives a few other discussions. Rabbi Yirmiyah sort of mocks this rationale. Rabbi Yirmiyah is famous in the Talmud for being a little bit of a nudnik. He asks kind of annoying questions and gets kicked out of the Beis Midrash. So he's, what's a snake venom? There's a snake venom test. If the cheese is old and if the cheese is really dry, there's no snake venom in it because it'll cause it to kind of turn rancid. You can't age cheese that's infected with venom. So if you have old cheese, you don't have to be concerned. And then the Gemara quotes a couple of other reasons. It's always going to have particles of milk. You cut open the cheese, little wet, moist, milk, bits that are there, and who knows if that milk is kosher milk that didn't turn into cheese, or some admixture of non-kosher milk that kind of was there in your mixture and remained as milk. The Gemara, we saw this last week, assumes, and it probably is true, you can't make cheese from non-kosher milk. Other rationales, because they use Ma'amidino tabe or kevat neve. They use the skin of the stomach, which maybe has like a status of meat, as opposed to the cave of the stomach itself, which implies okay, fine. So and then he concludes and he says no, the kevat shchita of ekochavim nevela. Okay, and so the stomach of a animal that was slaughtered by a Gentile is in fact a nevela. That is a nevela animal. It's not kosher. The Gemara continues. We're sort of skimming. Rav Malkiah says its surface is smeared with pig fat. They would cover the cheese in pig fat. Rav Chisda says it's curdled in vinegar. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says they would curdle it with the sap of orla plants. Saraf ha'orla. Orla is a tree that's been planted in the first 3 years. It's not, the tree and its fruit is not kosher, and they would use the sap of this tree for their curdling process as sort of a vegetable source of enzymes. Okay, so these are all different reasons. Okay, that are offered for why. So it seems that there was maybe no resolution in the Gemara to the reason for prohibiting cheese, and because we have a multitude, we have the first reason, they are curdling it in the nevela stomach, which Rabbi Shmuel doesn't quite like. Then maybe they're using idolatrous stomachs, which Rabbi Shmuel doesn't like that answer either. Then Rishub ben Levi suggests it's snake venom, and then we have three other suggestions. It's the orla sap, sarapsal orla, it's the pig fat smeared, and it's the vinegar. Okay, vinegar, which is a wine derivative and wouldn't be kosher. Okay.
Vinegar is sometimes used to curdle cheese, by the way.
Yes, that's right. You can use vinegar also to make, if you don't have buttermilk, you can pour vinegar in your milk, it'll kind of, so where does this leave us? Yeah. Oh.
So isn't this, one kind of wonder if this isn't a way for them to segregate or come up with a reason in the same way wine,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
supposed to drink wine with Gentiles. So, we don't want you fraternizing with them. We all know how delicious cheese is, and if they've got it and you want it, the next thing you know, you're going to be kibitzing with them. And then,
Yada, 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 it's mixed dancing.
all and at the time, in a way that kind of makes sense, because it wasn't like it is now, where my neighbors are everybody and I love them all. It was a very hostile, potentially hostile environment. And the last thing that either the Gentile or the Jew wanted was their children mating with each other. And if cheese could stop the mating process, then so be it.
So if that's very, very possible, and that suggests that I forget where I saw that. That's very possible. And if you see the Mishnah, the series of Mishnayot, they describe things pertaining to Gentiles that are idolatry that we don't have anything to do with, and there's a benefit prohibition, then things, there's no benefit prohibition, we don't eat it, and then things that we are allowed to eat. So there's a whole range of things that are all regulating our interaction with this broader non-Jewish world, and some of them seem to be directly related to their idolatrous pagan religion, like Greco-Roman paganism, and this community is in clash. Some of it seemed to be more about, just trying to have a community that has boundaries and integrity, that can sort of relate with friendliness and peace, with others, but also maintain some cohesion as a community, which requires some degree of social isolation. I would say it's not so simple. We're still, I think, figuring out how to, be citizens of the world and to be good neighbors and to treat all people with peace and respect, etc. But also to maintain enough distinctiveness that we perpetuate ourselves as a people. It's not an easy balance, and some of these, and I think many of these rules are absolutely about that. Absolutely. Okay, here's what Tosfot. Here's what Tosfot. This is a position of Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam is one of Rashi's grandsons, so he's a 12th century French scholar. Omer Rabbeinu Tam ki achshav lo matzinu tam pashut lisor gevina v'kachavim ta'tam isarhu misham nikor. Okay, so he says the reason that the Talmud clearly is the snake venom reason, and therefore we are left without a clear rationale for this prohibition. And how does he know that the reason is the snake venom? Because D'kai Milan halacha Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Aflagay Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, then that's the whole next big section of the Tosfot, is to prove that whenever you have a discussion of different sages, Shua ben Levi, he wins, he trumps. Okay, the Talmud doesn't. The rules aren't obvious, but later scholars have sort of derived ways of determining halacha based on this freewheeling Talmudic debate. And one of the rules is, Yeshua ben Levi, he always wins. So when he says something, that clearly is the answer. That's the bottom line halacha. Yeshua ben Levi is correct, and therefore halacha is in accordance with him. Therefore, the reason why we don't eat Gentile milk is snakes. And so that's a whole conversation. He points out, position of Rashi, ein of the chachavim shotim la'arev bo chalav tamei me'achar she'eino omed, right? Ela vadai ein atam ela mishum nikor. So it can't be that we're concerned that they're mixing non-kosher milk into their cheese milk, because the Gentiles are not that stupid. They're not going to pour milk into their mixture that's not going to turn into cheese. If you put camel milk or pig milk into your vat to make cheese, the camel milk won't turn into cheese. So you're just wasting camel milk. It's not going to add anything. So no one's going to do that. Yes?
Yes. Speaking of Gentiles and not being stupid, I mean, like, what's our secret to keep snakes away? If we're aware that
Good
there's
point.
an issue of snakes getting into cheese, then like other people are going to also find out, like, oh, hey, we should keep the snakes away from our cheese. So, I mean, like, why do we have the secret to?
That's a great point. It's a great point. So,
if you want to say that like Gentiles don't keep snakes away from their cheese, like that's an empirical claim that you could measure like the amount of snake venom in.
totally. So it is actually possible for different communities to have vastly different knowledge of medicine. And I did a little research into cholera this week because I alluded to cholera in one of the sermons, in my Yom Kippur sermon. And so I did a little bit of research into cholera, and a generation or two earlier in Western Europe, they knew how cholera was spread and how to prevent a cholera epidemic and how to treat cholera. Actually, you can survive cholera if you get proper hydration. Basically, you die of dehydration before your body has a chance to fight off the virus. And if you just stay hydrated intravenously, you can survive cholera. And they knew that in Western Europe several generations before that was known in Eastern Europe, and people were dying of cholera at a time when it was treatable in West. And that's true with Ebola. Ebola, if you are well hydrated, you have a pretty good chance of surviving. And thousands of people are dying, right? So it's just, so I'd say you can have a dangerous situation that sort of the knowledge of forceps were kept a secret for hundreds of years. A technology that can save and does save, untold numbers of lives was kept a secret for centuries. So it's not necessarily true that you could have two communities that have different hygiene standards or different responses to a dangerous situation, and that wouldn't necessarily be become obvious. But it's a very good question. I don't want to, but it's a good question. But I think there is a possible answer you could offer. Yeah?
Another possible answer to that would be like somebody might sell their cheese because somebody was eating a cheese sandwich or something and they got sick and died and they blamed it on snake-bitten cheese. So sell it to the Jews. Or so it might be. It might be that they're afraid that the Gentiles are trying to get rid of the cheese that they believe a snake has bitten.
Oh, I see. The only cheese they would sell us would be the stuff that they're worried about. Okay, good. It's interesting, because there are non-Jews who think that we do that when we, sell all of our treif.
And why are they currently
meat
like that?
gets that's all in America. All of the slaughterhouses, where the kosher meat comes from, they all. There's very high rates of meat that's treif, that meaning there's adhesions in the lungs, the lungs aren't pristine enough to be glad kosher, and they just sell it to a non-kosher division of the same company, or they have another line it goes to, and there is some sometimes Gentiles find out about this and they're a little bit upset, but anyway, let's continue. ואנו שאין נחשים מצויים בינינו, אין לחוש משום גילוי ואין לומר דבר של מניין וצריך מניין אחר להתירו, כי ודאי הוא כשאסרו תחילה לא אסרו אלא במקום שנחשים מצוין. However, certainly the reason is because of snakes, and therefore we who live in places where there are no snakes have no reason to be concerned for things that are left exposed. You leave your wine uncorked overnight or your water uncorked overnight. You don't have to be worried about that. And don't tell me, Devar Shel Minyan, don't tell me that if there was a vote taken in the Sanhedrin or whatever, some assembly of the rabbis took a vote, and we have a rule that Devar Shel Minyan, whenever there's a vote taken and a piece of legislation is enacted, it requires another vote to undo that piece of legislation of a body that is greater in number or greater in stature. And who are we, maybe we're greater in number, we're certainly not greater in stature, so how could we undo this decree? Don't tell me, Rabbeinu Tam is saying, don't tell me that this was a piece of legislation that exists independent of the original rationale, because certainly when they made that piece of legislation, like clause number 6 was, this is only true in places with snakes. That had to have been included in the initial legislation. So it's not that we're God forbid, we're not saying the rationale doesn't apply and therefore, we don't need to follow this rule anymore. We're just saying the rule never was intended to exist in a place where there are no snakes. וגם בהרבה מקומות יש שאוכלים אותם מפני שמעמידים אותם בפרחים וגם גוני נבון התירו אותם במקומן מטעם שמעמידים אותם בפרחים במקומנו שמינות בקבע אומר הרב חיים שיש רבי בן רב חיים שיש טעם קצת לאסור מפני שמולכין הקבע באורה ואיכה איסור דבשר בחלב דמליח הרי פירותך ואני ראיתי במקומות שהן מעמידים בנבלה דבר אחר מליח. So many places they eat Gentile cheese, and the sage of Narbonne I think is in Narbonne. Thank you. Narbonne, right? Is in southern France, I believe, right? Right. So Provence. So in the time of the Tosafot, Provence was really almost a separate country from like northern France, and they spoke a different language, and there was the king of France didn't really have much say over what happened in Provence, and the Jewish community was also very distinct. When you think about like Ashkenazi Jewry and the German community, the French community, so that French community, that's northern France, like in the area around Paris, where the Tosafot lived. Provence was its own Jewish culture, own rabbinic traditions, and much more akin to Catalonia, which is just on the other side of the Pyrenees, and the Catalonian Jewish community and the Provençal Jewish community had much more in common than either one did with the Spanish or Northern French Jewish community. So Rabbeinu Tam wasn't in Narbonne, but he knew what was happening there, and they ate Gentile cheese because they used non-animal sources of rennet. They used vegetable rennet, and if they were to use animal rennet, there would be a concern because it's salted in the stomach with its skin all together, and that's a concern of dairy and meat together because salting is like cooking, so it's like cooked in its skin. See, there's no. Let's sort of go back and sort of why is sort of unsaid. This is we'll get there. We'll see it. We'll see it in. Yes.
Is rennet like acid or the skin?
It's an enzyme that's part that you can chemically derive and sort of isolate, but I think it was in the olden days it's like in the skin. It's what the little cow uses to digest the milk. So it's there in the skin of the stomach, but it's an enzyme. I think, as far as I've never seen it. I don't know. So Tosafot here presents a rationale for permitting. It seems though that Rabbeinu Tam himself didn't eat Gentile cheese, but he's presenting a rationale why it should be okay, and he's telling us about a Jewish community that had the practice of eating Gentile cheese. Okay, we're going to go a little faster now to finish in time. Okay, source 5. This is Rambam. Okay, so Rambam, we're now in the Sephardic community, a little bit later than Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, any type of milk found amongst Gentiles should be forbidden because they may have mixed in non-kosher milk. We talked about this last week. Ugvinat akum muteret she'ein chalav bematmea mitgaben. Right, but Gentile cheese should be fine because you can't make cheese out of non-kosher milk. Aval b'mei chachmei Mishnah in Mishnaic times. Gazru al gvinat akum ve'asrum mipnei shemamidin ota bi'or keva shel shchitatan shinevela. Okay, in the time of the Mishnah, they made a decree against it because they curdle the milk in the stomach of an animal that they slaughter, which is forbidden as an nevela. That's where they put it to cause it to solidify. If one would say the stomach skin is a very small entity when compared to the milk that is used to solidify it, why is it not nullified because of its insignificant size? Because it is used as the catalyst to cause the cheese to curdle. It's devar ha'ma'amid. And since the catalyst which causes it to curdle is forbidden, everything is forbidden, as will be explained. Okay? So, there's no problem of basar v'chalav. There's no problem of dairy and meat because it's not meat anymore. It's just like an enzyme. It's not actual, the prohibition of dairy with meat is a prohibition of things that are cooked together or a prohibition of things that are taste that's imparted. You can't cook dairy and meat together, and you can't eat meat and dairy that are infected with the taste of the other. But cheese that sort of solidifies in a stomach of an animal stomach has no taste of meat at all. There's no taste imparted, nor are they cooked together, except for the case that Tosafot just mentioned, if they salt it together, because salting is like cooking, and that would be a concern. However, if the animal source is non-kosher, then we are concerned, because when it comes to dairy and meat, we have this issue of taste is what we're concerned about. When it comes to non-kosher items, we're also concerned about taste, and normally with non-kosher things, if there's no taste, it's also fine. If a tiny drop of bacon juice falls into your chillent, everything's okay, because the taste is going to be nullified in more than 60 times its volume of chillent. Everything's okay. But this is a devar ma'amid, it's a catalyst. You put in the rennet and you see the impacts. You can't say the non-kosher substance is batel, it's nullified in this huge mixture, because you're staring at the effect that it's had on the substance. Okay, it's a devar ma'amid, it's caused it to curdle right before your eyes. You can't say it's nullified. And that's why Rambam saying it, that we are concerned about Gentile cheese, because they use non-kosher, rennet from a non-kosher source to curdle it. Okay, so far so good? Yes, David?
So it seems like there's another issue, rather than meat milk, there's an issue of your hip.
Yes, that's the issue. Meaning that when
that is a milk issue?
No, that is the issue. Meat and milk is not an issue at all. It's only the nevela issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you're not eating it, so why is it?
Not eating what?
Why is an avela an issue if it's not?
No, the enzyme is in the milk, and it has an impact on the milk, and so therefore the whole milk has the status of nevela. Okay. He continues. Rabbi continues. Gvina shema medinota ha'akum be'asavim or b'mei peirot kigon tzarafet teinim. What if they use fig sap, or they use other vegetable sources of this enzyme to make it into cheese? V'reha nikarin b'gvina, and you can tell this kind of cheese is different because maybe it says on it, vegetarian cheese or something like that, or maybe because it says, like Kraft, and like they would never, use like real animal enzymes anymore. Okay. Horu miktzat geonim shiasura. So some of the great scholars, the geonim, have said that it is forbidden. Shekafar gazru al kol gvinat ha'akum bein shamidu b'devar ha'asur bein shamidu b'devar ha'mutar gzeir mishum shamidinota b'devar ha'asur. So some have said it's forbidden because once there's a decree, the decree was made across the board. Unlike Tosafot, all cheese is forbidden, and therefore we don't differentiate between the source of the rennet. There's just a rabbinic decree: no Gentile cheese. Period. Okay, so a few questions here we can ask with this. One question is, what counts as cheese? Is yogurt cheese? Is butter cheese? Is cottage cheese? Is spreadable gvina levana, farmer's cheese? Is Lebanon? Are these things cheese, or midah has to be like firm, hard? Is that this decree? So how much Jewish involvement do we need in cottage cheese, for example? Okay, the bottom line, most poskim say not all that much. It's soft. We're pretty lenient. That's why it's very easy to find farmer's cheese that with a hechsher, because we say this doesn't apply to things that are soft. Another question: Jewish involvement in the cheese making process. What does Jewish involvement mean? Does it mean a Jew has to watch it being, made, just like the case with milk, right? The Jew just has to watch the milk, be there, be present, and if the Jew is being present, doesn't actually have to act. He could come and go, right? Yotzev v'nichnas. If something has to be supervised by a Jew, the Jew doesn't have to be there 24/7. He could just come and go occasionally, and that's good enough. Or does the Jew have to take part some way in the cheese making process? The Shach says the Jew has to take part in the cheese making process, and this is adopted by the mainstream kashrut agencies, which also is a source of added strictness. Finally, what's Rambam's actual position? Does Rambam say, is he, Tosafot, it seems that Rabbeinu Tam was eating only kosher cheese, like Jewish cheese, but he sort of is providing a lot of support for the Chachmei Navon who were eating Gentile cheese. Rambam, it's sort of strange, right? He says, he says, here's the rationale, here's why we don't do it. Therefore, the rationale to permit, and regarding this other case where the rationale doesn't apply, some say it's forbidden. But he doesn't say what his own position is. On the other hand, he never says, and some say it's permitted. The only position he announces is the position that some say. So the question of how to read the Rambam is also a question that divides the later commentaries. And some of the commentaries in Rambam say, no, Rambam himself says the basic law is that Gentile cheese is forbidden, and some would say, read the Rambam and say, no, the basic fundamental law is that Gentile cheese is permitted. Okay, Shulchan Aruch says Gentile cheese is forbidden. The Shulchan Aruch, by the way, says Rambam thinks that too. The Shulchan Aruch wrote a book called, a commentary on the Rambam called Kesef Mishnah, and he reads the Rambam in that way. The Ramah, however, the Ashkenazi glass on the Kesef Mishnah, on the Shulchan Aruch says, okay, this is our custom to only eat Jewish cheese, and one should not lifrotz geder, don't break the fence, that has protected our community and our norms and our traditions by undermining this prohibition. The Talmud says the punishment of somebody who lifrotz geder. What happens to him? The Talmud warns. Gets bitten by a snake, right? Very apropos. Okay. So don't change the custom, don't break open this fence unless it's a place where there was an earlier practice of being lenient. And if the Jew sees it, that's sufficient. So the Ramah is lenient in communities that had the custom, like Narvon, of eating Gentile cheese. And he's also lenient, the Jew only has to watch it. The Shach, like I said, is going to be strict about that. Right? And if you just see the cheese but not the milk, that's also fine, because once it gets turned into cheese, you know the milk was kosher after the fact. Okay. We're not going to see inside. I have the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah, Bar Shner's commentary on the Mishnah, very interesting. Source 9 is the Aruch HaShulchan, who's quite strict about all this, much more strict than the Aruch HaShulchan is. Source 10 is the Shach, who says the Jew has to be really involved in some way, not just seeing. Okay. Source 11. Rav Soloveitchik ate Gentile cheese. This is a sort of one of these sort of scandalous things about the 1950s. I found a little essay that discusses this by my friend and college classmate, Rabbi Shlomo Brody, who writes, and you can read the whole essay. The topic is whether halachic handbooks, can sort of change the course of Jewish law. It's a very interesting little blog post essay he wrote, which you can worth looking and reading. But in the context, he says, so the Veishik Zetzal offered an interesting solution to this conundrum to explain his opinion with regard to consuming Kraft cheese and other Gevinat Akum, non-Jewish cheese, is well known. The Rav, following the Ramah, ate Kraft cheese when no or little Jewish produced cheese was available, since the curdling process of the cheese was not done inside an animal skin sack. It has been reported by official Shechter in Miknei HaRav, however, that while the Rav told his Talmidim in shiur of this leniency, he would not publicize it to Balabatim, to lay people, who asked him this question, as he considered it to be a case of halacha ve'ein morin ken barabim, which is the essence of the law, but shouldn't be, taught in public, since it went against the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. One Talmud, however, questioned the Rav's logic, because he'd already publicized the heter in shir. The Rav responded by quoting leniency akula, found in Rashi's Talmud commentary, in which Rashi would allow work to be done on Tisha B'Av at night, but asserts that this kula should not be publicly spread. Kashamru asur v'melacha gabi tani tzibor lo omru ela b'yom av abalayla mutar mihachamashma d'belele Tisha B'Av mutar v'melacha v'ein bitul ela b'yom aval ein mefarsamina devar. Don't share this matter that I just told you, that you can do work Tisha B'Av at night. Rashi, the Rav noted, was of course publicizing this kula by writing it in his commentary, but apparently felt that anyone who would be learning Gemara with his commentary should be considered one of the tznuim, who could be trusted to use the heter appropriately. Similarly, his learned and committed Talmidim could be trusted with the Kraft cheese heter, but it was inappropriate to announce it publicly. In other words, those elite who can learn the heter inside the Sfarim can be trusted while others cannot. If this is indeed the correct distinction, that we can publicize the lenient halakha to the learned who have access to the Makarot, then how does this work with contemporary halakha handbooks? On the one hand, one might assume that anyone who's opening the book must care about halakha and therefore can be trusted with the kula. On the other hand, the fact that they're resorting to a halakhic handbook would indicate that they are not learned enough to find that kula inside primary sources and therefore perhaps are not trustworthy enough. To a certain extent, this relates to the basis of the kula, the heter for those who can learn the Sfarim. Does their trustworthiness stem from their erudition or their effort in learning the sources? Or to put it in Lamdish terms, is they're learning a siba for a heter or just a siman for their loyalty to the halakha? Is it a reason, a rationale, or just a siman, a piece of evidence, okay? The conclusion of many of these halakha handbooks, by the way, is to put the strict law in English and the lenient law in Hebrew, right? If you want the lenient law, you have to read the Hebrew footnotes. That seems to be the standard of many of these halakha handbooks. That is, you cannot count the number of occasions where that's the case. Yes.
We don't know what the Rav's justification was, though.
So that's source 12. Source 12 is an essay in a journal called Masorah, which is the OU's like Torah journal. It's like mostly like Kashrut stuff. So there's an essay that investigates this, and not by one of the Rav's like students, but one of like a student of some of his students. And this is source 12, and the conclusion, the conjecture, which makes sense to me, is that it's based on Rav Soloveitchik, finding the rationale of Tosafot very compelling, and also reading Rambam the way some of us did ourselves, that the Rambam thinks that the essential halakha also is that we can be lenient if there are vegetable sources for the rennet. So that was probably the basis for his halakha. And I just, Rav Herzog also, I printed out the wrong page. So there's a journal called B'Netiv Hechalav, which sort of means like the Milky Way, like the Milky Path, the pathway of milk. It's a halakha journal all about milk. Published by Tnuva, the Israeli dairy cooperative, and they had a collection of tshuvot by Rav Herzog from the 40s and 50s and who permitted the importation into Israel of non-kosher cheese from America, Kraft cheese from America that could be brought in at a time when there was real hardship and poverty in Israel, and there just wasn't so much food. So that exists. I just printed the wrong page, and so I don't have it. But it's an interesting journal that you could yes.
Point of reference question. Just as they're talking here. So, non-kosher milk is pig milk?
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
am I on the right track? I
Yep.
just want to make sure. And then, my part B of this is, because I do question everything, is it actually true you can't make cheese out of pig's milk?
I saw I don't know if is the first answer, the short answer. My slightly longer answer is I read a discussion of this in a 20th century halachic book by Rav David Tzvi Hoffman, where in his tshuva he prints a little chart where he has several different types of milks and their fat content, and there's a dramatically different fat content of pig, camel, and horse milk compared to sheep, goat, and cow milk. And so he suggests that he did some research, or he spoke to a chemist who validated this fact. Yes, it is true. You cannot make cheese out of non-kosher animals' milk, and I don't know of any cheese that's made of any non-kosher animals' milk. So it could be true.
I don't know, but it would have been humorous.
Yes.
You can make cheese
Yes.
and then
I mean, that wouldn't. Yes.
Oh, but you can't do it anyway. You can't do it anyway.
Correct. Okay, let's talk about. I'm sorry. I really need 6 minutes, and I only have 4 minutes, so maybe you'll stay 2 minutes late, and I'll try to be very concise. So the basic position, even in his lifetime, apparently, according to Rav Schechter, he only told his students, but didn't publicize, and the Kashrut agencies never endorsed that position, and the Kashrut agencies don't give hashgacha to cheese, to Gentile cheese. It's all cheese that a Jew is involved not only in watching, but actually in making, like the position of the shach, unless it's soft cheese. They're lenient about soft cheese, they're strict about everything having to do with hard cheese. And it's also true that in modern time, recent times, you now have a return to fancy organic cheese that's artisanal, this and that, which would actually be a concern of using nevela, using actual meat-derived rennet. That is actually something that could be a concern now that maybe wasn't a concern. Kraft cheese in the 50s, they were not using animal rennet, but maybe now, some farmer's market, cheese that was made by a nun in the mountains, maybe there was actual animal, rennet as this return to ancient cheese crafts and stuff. You know all about that, I guess, right? So, our resident cheese expert. No, okay. So it could be more of a concern now than it once was, but also there's been a kind of consensus that's emerged from the Kashrut agencies. So I want to say something about Kashrut agencies and their consensus and why, what's good about them and what's bad about them. Okay. When we say that a particular Kashrut agency is unreliable, what does that mean? It can mean several different things. It could mean that they are in fact quite reliable and have a lot of integrity, but they have a different opinion about a couple of important questions of Jewish law. Or a different system altogether, different philosophy of Jewish law. So you have, let's say you have some kashrut symbols or kashrut supervision that's done by conservative rabbis who are, could be, lovely people with a lot of integrity, but they have a different philosophy about halacha or that's why they're a different movement, because they think about certain big questions differently. And even though I eat in the homes of conservative Jews, if you have a personal relationship, they'll tell you, yes, I am a conservative Jew, and you are an Orthodox Jew, but you can eat this food because, X, Y, and Z is how I keep kosher in my home. And you can have that conversation. You can figure out what you can and what you can't eat. I wouldn't recommend something under the kashrut supervision of conservative rabbi because they have their own system of Jewish law, their own beliefs about Jewish law. It has integrity, it has value, but it's not my system, and so I don't want to be in a place of having to judge his or her kind of religious decisions. That's at least leave them, respect them, and let them make their own decisions. Again, different from a private relationship where you can have those conversations to figure out what you can or can't eat. Or they could be an Orthodox kashrut agency with a lot of integrity and a lot of reliability, but they have some minority, they've adopted, embraced some minority opinions about certain issues relevant to kashrut, and the other kashrut agencies don't accept them, and that would be a case, that's a classic case of triangle K, which from what I understand have a lot of integrity, are very reliable, but they have a few positions where they have a lenient stance on. The other major kashrut agencies are strict, and therefore they're in that not reliable camp. Next. A kashrut agency or a supervising rabbi, a mashgiach, could have integrity, but could be unreliable. Meaning he could have a lot of honesty and have really strict standards, but could be incompetent, could not have an operation that is savvy enough and sophisticated enough to actually supervise all of the operations, the restaurants, the catering halls, or the factories that he claims to provide supervision to. Because he's just a little bit, he's not savvy enough, he doesn't know enough about food science. Caterers take advantage of his naivete, whatever it might be, that's also a situation that could exist. And the third level, or the third or fourth level, depending if you're counting, could be an actually corrupt, unreliable, untrustworthy person who is, out for money, or this is an easy, whatever. He doesn't have real integrity. And when we say a kashrut agency, is non-reliable, we sort of group all of those things together, even though they each have their own, they're really quite distinct. I think, even though we're grouping them all together, I personally think it's advisable. There's an advantage, there's a value, let's say, in sticking with the mainstream agencies. I think what we have is sort of the way they work together. I think there's something kind of admirable about it. And to sort of illustrate this, is a book by Timothy Leighton, who is an anthropologist who studied kashrut, the kashrut industry, from an anthropological perspective. And he wrote an article in the Jewish Review of Books, which I excerpted a few paragraphs from. That's source 13. And he compares America versus Israel in the functioning of kashrut. And I'll just to see, Israel's chief rabbinate consists of a rotating presidency between the Ashkenazi and Sephardi chief rabbis who supervise a chief rabbinate council and a network of local chief rabbis. It serves as the ultimate authority on matters of Jewish law, including kosher certification. The Ministry of Religious Services, presided over by a cabinet minister, appoints and partially funds municipal and regional religious councils which administer kosher certification locally. A restaurant or banquet hall seeking kosher certification must apply to its local religious council. The council sends a staff member to conduct an initial inspection of the applicant's facility. If the council approves, it refers the application to the local chief rabbi, who formally grants certification by signing a certificate. The council then assigns a qualified inspector to provide ongoing supervision. These kosher inspectors must pass a test administered by the chief rabbinate. The certified business pays an annual fee to the council to maintain its certifications. Fees to the council range from $100 for a small restaurant to $3,500 for a large large hotel. In addition, the business pays the inspector an hourly wage set by the chief rabbinate of approximately $10.50. That's the system, okay? But as government audits, public commissions, and ongoing press coverage have shown, there are problems. And then he talks about the problems. Conflict of interest, the inspector is paid for by the restaurant. Accusations of no-shows. It's a government bureaucracy, it's a government monopoly that provides this supervision. If you market something as kosher in Israel, it has to be certified kosher by the state, Kashrut bureaucracy. And there's sort of mounting allegations of fraud on all levels. And some of that I have left on the source sheet as well. And it also, and the other, and so if you find the standards too strict, you have no way to appeal because you can't legally sell something as kosher without the state kashrut agency agreeing that it's kosher. And on the other hand, if they can't be too strict because their job, like they're a government ministry whose job it is to certify things as kosher. So it's sort of on both ends, it kind of causes problems. In contrast, the United States government's but the example of the U.S., last page, of the U.S. kosher certification system suggests otherwise. In the United States, a network of over 300 private certification agencies reliably ensures the kosher status of more than 135,000 retail products. Manufactured by some 10,000 companies, the system also provides certification to thousands of food service operations, such as restaurants, caterers, and hospitals throughout the United States. Competition between agencies which depend upon their good reputation among consumers and the quality of their service to clients to remain in business makes the agencies eager to avoid mistakes and misconduct before they happen and to report them promptly when they do occur. Moreover, agencies are quick to publicize the problems of rival agencies. Despite the competition, American kosher certification agencies are also highly interdependent. Certifiers of finished products or food service operations rely on other agencies' certification of ingredients further upstream in the production chain, which leads them to closely scrutinize each other's operations, creating a network of interagency oversight. This is Tim Layton's book, is about how it's like really an almost unique system of private supervision that like you normally think if something is going to be like highly regulated, the government has, like the FDA regulates, foods and drugs in America. It's like a government monopoly. You can't sell drugs without the FDA approving it, and that's the system we have. But somehow, Kashrut is highly efficient, competitive, and yet there's a lot of interagency cooperation between all these agencies because the Star K will allow a restaurant to, use ingredients that are certified by the OU. And so this coalescing of standards where the major agencies, the reliable agencies, are all basically come to an agreement about the standards they're going to apply allows them to compete on, here and there on standards, to compete on quality of service and price and, et cetera, but to sort of agree on standard, that's a real advantage. This amazing system where most products for sale in the supermarket have kosher certification, which is amazing. That's the product of sort of a coalescing of standards. And so even the most charitable of the unreliable, kosher agencies, it sort of breaks down this system, which is sort of based on everyone kind of coming to some agreement about standards. The downside is that all of these agencies, as they're cooperating, working interdependently of each other and coming to agreement, their clientele are like other kashrut agencies. If you ever talk to a guy who's like a mashgiach or a guy who works for one of these kashrut agencies, it's fun because they love halakha and they love science and food and it's great, but who are they accountable to? Who is their constituency? It's like other mashgiachim at other agencies. They're the ones that are impressing with their knowledge and standards and information as opposed to being like seeing their constituency as like the consumer. And so you do have, I think, sometimes the standards may be a little bit stricter than we might choose for ourselves. Because the people who are in the room having the conversation and coalescing around a standard are like kashrut professionals who love this and really this is their life is devoted to cultivating excellence in kashrut, and they're the ones in the room having these conversations rather than like the consumers or congregational rabbis. So that's one risk. And I'd say the other unrelated risk, which since I'll just mention it, is that they sell hechsherim to things that don't need it, which I think is raises other problems. So I'm not going to say anything about tablet K on the video camera, about which category it falls into, but once the camera turns off, which I'll do right now, I'm happy to tell you everything I know. Okay, thank you so much. I can stay for a few minutes, but I'm going to turn off the camera now.